We look at, for example, the social credit system in China that's in place. What happens there is that if you commit a faux pas, according to the government, you can be penalized. You can be prohibited from accessing your funds, from accessing your workplace, from being able to visit other people. And it may be that you didn't do anything wrong, but you spoke out against a government policy. And this is where I think it's all headed.
Imagine a world where you have to show all of your social media posts in order to be allowed into a country. Or what about one where law enforcement can use footage from your own door camera without a warrant? Or what if your social media posts could actually be used against you to prevent you from accessing your own money? This isn't some dystopian movie scenario that I'm describing. It's what's taking place right now. It's happening in the United States and around the world. I had a recent conversation with Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and we talked about such things related to privacy, your personal sovereignty and freedoms, and how to fight against what's going on. Check it out. Welcome to my channel, Andy.
Oh, it's great to be back, Hilda.
You are my go-to resource for what's happening when it comes to data and surveillance. And so I'm very curious about what's happening with social media accounts. I've heard that some countries are putting into place some kind of protocol that requires us to show 6 months of our media data activity. I'm like, is that true?
Well, yes, it is true. And let me say that this is part of a bigger plan to require essentially digital ID for all social media access. And it's the United States government that has introduced this policy. It's under review right now, so there is time to prevent it and make public comments. So you can find this on the Federal Register, which is where all things have to be published before they're enacted for public review. And it applies to people traveling to the United States for recreation or any other purpose from the nations that we're friendly with, that we don't suspect terrorists from. Okay, and there's an electronic visa system called ESTA, and that's where this is going to be required, which is that when you apply to travel to the United States, you have to give them access to the last 5 years of your social media. So that means all your social media handles on all the platforms that you used in the previous 5 years.
But why would they need that? What's the justification for such action?
Well, of course, this is, based on an executive order from Trump that talks about, terrorism and things like that. So preventing, terrorists from coming into the United States.
But it's
But
not like they would be posting on TikTok, hey, this is what I'm going to do.
and also there would be required a vast amount of investigative work, right? To even uncover a pattern. Like, think about how many posts there would be from one individual over 5 years who was active on social media. So I think you can surmise that what's going to happen is that this data will be fed into an AI database, like the kind of databases that Trump has contracted with companies like Palantir about, so that all that data could be combed for any suspicious activity. But the thing is, of course, this is always going to be very subjective. What is suspicious? What counts as terrorism? Like, if we look at the United Kingdom, okay, they have banned certain types of speech from social media, and they monitor and they arrest more than 30 people every day in that country for violating essentially this speech that is very subjective. So recently, someone was traveling to Florida and they did some target shooting with a shotgun and had photographs of themselves, holding a shotgun on social media. The minute they stepped back into England, they were arrested.
Oh my goodness. So AI like saw rifle or shotgun and boom, they targeted him. But Andy, some people say this. They say, "Well, I'm posting everything on social media anyway. So who cares who combs through my data? I'm innocent anyway, so there's nothing to be afraid of."
Well, what's innocent and what's guilty is going to depend on the whim and the policy of the government at that point in time. So you may feel like, you can be transparent about all your private activities now, but that may easily change in the future because some of the things that you've put out there may become regulated. Like if we look at, for example, the social credit system in China that's in place, because this, according to the international organizations who are behind implementing all of these strategies, this is where they want the world to go. Okay. And what happens there is that if you commit a faux pas, according to the government, you can be penalized. You can be prohibited from accessing your funds, from accessing your workplace, from being able to visit other people, right? From travel, et cetera, et cetera. And it may be that you didn't do anything wrong, but you spoke out against a government policy. And this is where I think it's all headed.
But just to be clear, right now this is being implemented with folks coming into the US. So citizens of the US might also say in a kind of complacent way, well, I don't have to worry because it's not me going somewhere else, it's other people coming in here.
Well, interesting you mentioned that because just in October, the European Union, all the Schengen nations, which is almost all of the EU, adopted a new system called the entry exit system, where this applies to, Americans going to Europe, where now you have to submit to biometric ID, essentially a digital ID, in order to travel to Europe, with a very few exceptions.
Wait,
So I'm sure that this is going to also include reciprocally social media and other things in the future. In some of the European countries, they already have issued digital IDs to their population, or they have deadlines. And in some places, they even require those IDs for various social media functions.
and just to bring up to speed those who haven't been following our little series on digital ID and so forth, what is so bad about having some of my data in some kind of database? Okay, people know that I'm traveling here, there, and everywhere. Why should I care?
Well, there'll be really kind of two broad reasons. One is that it won't just be certain information, it'll be everything you do will be known because over time, the digital ID will be adopted by essentially all products and services available in all sectors of society. So that when you log on to social media, when you travel, when you use your navigation app, when you do any financial transactions, when you do any shopping, when you obtain any kind of health care, right? Essentially, everything you do will be known and monitored. It won't just be, a couple of obvious things or things that, you already know that you have to show your passport and your ID when you travel. So that's logged unless, you drive by car. Well, it used to be anonymous, right? When you could pay tolls by cash. But now, of course, because of license plate readers, what's really disappearing is your ability to do anything privately and anonymously.
This is so
And that
fascinating.
means that everything would be subject to regulation. So, this is the coming future. And that's one, of the major aspects of it. The second is that as private industries are induced with government incentives to adopt these things, like, for example, in Mexico, the government said that I think it's by February or something of 2026, they're going to require a digital ID. But the government there has limited resources and they don't have the infrastructure to, scan everyone in the country and use it extensively. However, what's happening there is now that all the banks have installed their own machines to do biometric scanning on the account holders. And in order to open a bank account in Mexico now, you have to subject yourself essentially to a private digital ID.
Mm.
And so that means that if you are not willing to do that, you're not able to have a bank account. And this is what is going to happen in the future, is that private companies in various industrial sectors will start requiring it. The government will be able to say, hey, we don't require it, right? You don't have to have it. You just can't use the banking system or the healthcare system or the education system, etc. There's a client of mine in, I think this is Sweden, where they've already adopted this, and the banks and other companies are using this there. And he was telling me that because he didn't want to use it. And so he would send written correspondence to the bank. But here's the problem: they would answer him electronically. And in order to obtain the answer, he would have to use the digital ID to log in to their website.
Ah, oh my
They would
goodness.
not reply in paper. So it's like you could see that they're allowing him to correspond in paper, right? But not fully. So that's how they make it extremely inconvenient. Now, could he like go to an office, wait for hours, speak to someone, then be directed to someone else, et cetera, down the line? But that's how they're going to essentially force people or compel people to join this system, and then they'll be subjected to all the surveillance.
Are you sure you just haven't been watching like a lot of dystopian movies or something?
Well, there is disclosure in many of the popular media, right? Like, for example, Black Mirror, right? A series, I think it's on Netflix, did several episodes about various aspects of this. There's one on, the social credit system, where I think a woman is prevented from attending a wedding, and then a string of events, leads her to, essentially become homeless
Oh my
in
gosh.
that kind of a system, right? Because of misbehaving.
Well,
Um,
actually, instead of looking ahead to, dystopian alternative realities, all we have to do is look back at 2020. I felt almost tagged because as a person who decided not to get injected with anything, because suddenly you had to have proof of that having happened to get into restaurants. They were saying, they were warning that we wouldn't be able to travel. Neighbors were uninviting me to parties. So my status was alerted to the neighborhood, even though I hadn't even put anything on social media. I don't even know. But the point is, that's the kind of thing that you're concerned about, that people with power may prevent us from doing what we want to do, and we're going to be losing our freedoms.
yeah, well, that's an excellent example, because if we examine what you just described, it wasn't the government that was preventing you from going to a restaurant or flying on an airplane or anything like that. It was the private companies. Now, what happened behind the scenes is that the government was actually bribing, I call it a bribe, those companies to administer those policies. Because remember, first the government shut everything down. Now that cost all the businesses quite a bit. And then it said, okay, you can start back up now. And if you want, we'll give you this money to recover your losses, but you have to do X, Y, and Z policy. And those companies didn't think about if they're violating anyone's rights or whatever, right? They just said, we'll take it. And this occurred in, school districts. This is how the airlines were able to check your medical records and require you to wear masks and such. It was only because the government knew it was illegal; they couldn't do it, so they paid the airlines to enforce it. And then eventually, thanks to our friend whose name escapes me at the
Leslie
moment,
Manukian.
Leslie Manukian, thank you, suing in federal court and getting all that overturned. But it still, it took some time. So, that's when I drove to Dallas and I think met you for the first time.
Hmm. Well, lest people think, well, this is just all related to travel. I never leave home. Let's talk a little bit about the new Ring service that people use so that they can see when a package is delivered or who's at their door. What's the issue with that?
Well, let me start by saying that surveillance isn't universally a bad word because when it comes to our private property, right, like our home, our safety, our family, we want to be able to use surveillance to monitor, right, for, a home invasion, robbery, et cetera, all, the things that occur.
Hmm.
And so having a home surveillance system is something that I actually recommend and I would have. But here's the problem with Ring camera. And, they came on the scene, made it very cheap and convenient to have some surveillance at home, right? And there's a lot of scams that happen at your front door, like people pretending to be delivering food that you ordered when they really, it's a scam to rob you and such like that. Of course, theft of your packages, especially this time of year. And so it's a good idea to have some kind of surveillance to alert you to those things and offer evidence in case you need to prosecute somebody and recover your property. But the problem here lies with the internet connection because uploading that data to the internet, and of course, the corporate model is that that data now belongs to Ring. It's not yours. So that means that they can do other things with it, right? They can sell it, they can use it to develop other products. And they've done this in a very problematic way. So, one thing is that they actually can network people's Ring cameras in the same neighborhood and essentially create a surveillance grid that's beyond your house that connects all the houses in the neighborhood, right, to a complete surveillance area. And that means your neighbors would know what you're doing when you're near their property, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, we've seen now this kind of surveillance data by private companies being used as an end run around the Fourth Amendment. So warrantless searches. So if there's a crime suspected, right, this data can be obtained without any kind of warrant, right? Because the private companies will just give it to law enforcement agencies.
They can just do that?
So yes, yeah, there's lots of precedents. They've been doing this. It's been ruled admissible in court.
This reminds me of some of the DNA and me, or 23 and me that people do. They are curious about their lineage, so they have some blood samples sent to a company that will tell them, what their heritage is, Italian or Russian or whatever. And, it seems like a very fun little thing to figure out. But the issue is, then they have your information. Talk about information. They know exactly what your genetic makeup is. And apparently, if there is a crime, they can use it, I think legally, tell me if I'm wrong, Andy, to find out if you were responsible. Like they can use it and give it over to law enforcement.
I'm not sure about that, actually.
You might
It's
want to look
definitely
into
worth looking into
it.
because
Absolutely.
one thing is that there's no like chain of custody. When you send a sample to 23andMe, you don't have like a video of the sample coming from you and then a positive identification. And that's generally like the legal standard. So I'm not sure that they could use that for a positive identification in court. Now, could they use it like for investigative purposes, then get a warrant to get another test to confirm it? That's a possibility. But
Yeah.
with this surveillance data, I know that it's directly admissible, in court cases as evidence, sidestepping, any need for a search warrant.
And so this might be conjecture, but I'm curious, do you think that this was the intent of for the Ring cameras all along to make this kind of surveillance grid that would kind of usurp some of our freedom and autonomy by
Right.
keeping track of all that we're doing.
I'm not sure if their intent, was from like a law enforcement point of view, but I guarantee that because of when they came to be, this was already an industry standard that they would be selling their data, because that is valuable and there already exist exchanges, where companies typically sell this data, right? This is, we all know that we are spied on in marketing terms, right? That we see ads pop up for things that we were interested in, but not on that platform or that website. And how did that information come in? And there are many ways that it gets there, but there's a whole market of buying and selling that data. And I guarantee Ring, that was part of their business, their original business model, was also to do that. They probably have other incentives to share with law enforcement. Perhaps contracts like Flock, for example. Flock, who makes the license plate reading cameras, which of course can be adapted with software to have facial recognition, and they already recognize other things about the car besides the license plate, like dents and dings and scratches and things like that, to give a more solid identification. But they contract out to many police agencies and cities. So that's their clients. So if they, from their private cameras, that are at homeowners association contracts, for example, if they share that data with law enforcement, then they're, more likely to get bigger law enforcement contracts.
Wow. Yeah, there's money behind this, and it's hard to know who's got the nefarious motives. But the point is, as I said earlier, our privacy and our sovereignty and autonomy are being threatened. As we start to wrap up, I want to ask if you can give me
Well,
a few proactive steps to resist
yeah.
this kind of takeover of surveillance and ID information.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Well, one of the most important things is to opt out of any biometric scans. So, even on your device, don't use your thumbprint, don't use your face scan. When you go to travel, you can opt out of the TSA facial scan. Don't use it for any private companies. Like even my own banking app allows you to use Face ID to log in. So don't ever use those. If any business requires it, like a hotel or anything like that, don't stay there, or just tell them that you opt out. Can you still stay there? Most likely they'll say yes. I've just ignored those things and had no problem. So that's one of the biggest things to look out for sure. When it comes to home surveillance, you can get what they call closed circuit system, where you're recording the video surveillance in onto a your own memory storage device, right?
Mm.
Like usually they use SD cards, right? Or onto a hard drive of something, so that you have the video and you control it. It doesn't go out there. It can't be sold to any third parties. So it still offers you the same protections, but without any, outside interference. And, the same is true for any kind of devices that you get that would connect to the internet. Like, even your car, like sometimes they might have certain features like a remote start that you have to, download an app and sign up.
Yeah.
That allows them to much more easily capture all of your driving data.
Oh my gosh, this is all so fascinating. And what's wild to me is you and I have conversations, and then I feel like things can come true or they unfold further. So, we've had a couple of these, or three probably, and it's like, wow, I can look back and be like, yeah, you were talking about that 6 months ago. So I think people should stay tuned for what we're going to talk about next.
Well, I'll tell you, it's unveiling the true purpose of AI, because we all have seen that there's been huge investments in AI. We hear about these data centers being constructed, right, with large energy requirements. And we think that it's going to be things like ChatGTP, right, that it's going to be used for. But it's really all about surveillance. And so it dovetails completely with what we're talking about, the whole mega investments that have gone into the AI industry. That's really what it's about, surveillance. So they're going to be paid, by the governments and private companies for surveillance. They're not going to be making money from consumer products or benefiting us.
Okay, I want to definitely talk about AI next time. People are using it at this time of year right now for, cute little, like, I'm going to make a picture of myself glammed up with, a sequin dress on and peppermint sticks around me for the holidays. And they think it's just fun and games, but it's more than that.
Yeah, well, it can be used for that purpose, but that's not the business model. They can't make any money doing that. And that there's been huge investments in it, and it's not for that purpose. Unfortunately, people kind of feel like it has all this potential because it's some kind of real intelligence, but that's not what it really is. And its limitations are starting to become evidence, but it's an excellent tool for surveillance.
Whoa. Well, thanks again for joining me today. I can't wait till we talk again, Andy. Appreciate you.
Same here, Hilda.